Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. A marathon city council meeting on city violence began at 11 this morning and just wrapped up within the last 2 hours. Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown gave remarks and answered questions from 47 council members who were present today. The meeting was called by alderpeople in defiance of Mayor Lightfoot. Brown blasted the meeting for taking away time he and other top brass would normally be working.
This briefing before you today comes at a cost of critical scheduled time for our leadership team to discuss deployment decisions that we are all foregoing to ensure you have this information once again.
The city's top investigator announces he'll step down in October. Chicago Inspector General Joe Ferguson says he won't seek another term from the mayor and will leave after 12 years on the job. His office is tasked with investigating and overseeing both city council, the mayor's office, the police department, and other city agencies. Ferguson was first appointed by Mayor Daley and reappointed by Mayor Rahm Emanuel. He's fought with city council over the years, notably Alderperson Ed Burke, on expanding the office's powers to have oversight over alderpeople. 4th of July weekend fireworks are back on in Chicago. The mayor's office announces there will be a fireworks show on the lakefront tomorrow night starting at 9:30. This after an announcement earlier in the year that fireworks were canceled due to COVID. The mayor says this year's show will be dedicated to residents who follow the COVID guidelines to help get the city back on track, and says the show will be different from the typical 4th of July display.
Attracting crowds to a particular location. So that's really important. The fireworks are going to be able to be seen from fairly far north to fairly far south, but we're not having people gather in a particular location as we would in ordinary circumstances.
An iconic Chicago spot served as the backdrop for a citizenship naturalization ceremony today. More than 170 people from 45 different countries became naturalized U.S. citizens at Wrigley Field. The event was attended by Cubs chairman Tom Ricketts, who notes it's the first time Wrigley has hosted an event like that. Governor J.B. Pritzker was also there, and he praised the group for their journey to citizenship.
Thank you for bringing your dreams and your drive and your patriotism to the United States. You renew our faith in our national future. Today, I'm very proud to welcome you all as my fellow Americans.
And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Patrick Smith of WBEZ, Alex Nitkin of the Daily Line, Lynn Sweet of the Chicago Sun-Times, and WTTW's Amanda Vinicky. We welcome all of you on this beautiful holiday weekend. Let's get right to it. Alex Nitkin, this marathon special city council meeting where CPD Superintendent David Brown faced questions from about 47 aldermen. Did anything substantive come out of this?
That's a very good question. I would overall describe it as a kind of airing of grievances that aldermen have wanted to have with the Chicago Police Department for a long time, feeling frustrated, in many cases feeling like they were out of the loop or the police were not necessarily meeting with them or community groups. There were a whole range of different opinions and questions that came up. Some were saying that they wanted that more collaboration. Some were asking about, alternative or non-police responses to crimes and whether they had, the police department had considered various different methods. What we did not hear a whole lot of, I think, was really substantive new information from the superintendent that he hadn't provided before. And we also certainly did not hear about very much, except maybe at the very beginning, about what the police department is doing to head off crime, specifically on the 4th of July weekend, which was the purported reason for having the meeting in the first place. I think it became a lot more wide-ranging than that.
Right. Brown kept saying that he didn't want to show all of his cards on the July 4th and, in general, summer violence prevention strategy. Lynn Sweet, the fact that alder people, for the second time in Mayor Lightfoot's term, have called an emergency meeting against the mayor's wishes, is it further evidence that she does not command a whole lot of control of city council?
No, absolutely not. It doesn't mean that. Just because the aldermen decide to flex their muscle doesn't mean that when it comes to a vote. You just heard that nothing really came of this. What's important are things that pass out of city council, not whether or not there's a marathon meeting. So I would not use the fact that there is a special meeting and it's rare as any important yardstick as to the effectiveness of the mayor. It's just looking at the wrong things.
And older people perhaps getting grief from their constituents about what they're doing about the high violence. And once again, Brown blamed these numbers on the criminal courts and electronic monitoring for allowing offenders to walk free. Here's a bit of what he said.
There's an explosion of people on electronic monitoring that's harming our city. This is madness. Our courts are out of control. These decisions are harming our city, harming our children, our babies.
Patrick Smith, this has been the messaging strategy from the mayor and the police superintendent over the last weeks, casting a lot of blame at the Cook County courts for letting more people out on electronic monitoring and not holding in-person jury trials. Do the statistics bear out the complaints of the mayor and Brown?
They just do not. You know, there have been multiple academic studies from Loyola, from the University of Chicago, looking at people out on bail, people out on electronic monitoring. And to be clear, there are instances, tragic instances, when people who are awaiting their day in court are then charged with a new crime, sometimes a new violent crime. But the numbers are just not anywhere near close enough to be contributing to the, to be driving violence in Chicago. And this is not just a talking point for the last couple of weeks. It's been their talking point for the last, since Brown took office 15 months ago. And, I did a story earlier this year that said there's internal emails that show at least some people in the mayor's office, they know the statistics don't back this up, but they are not backing off of this talking point clearly.
And actually, Patrick, I don't know if you heard it. You got, I think, name dropped for that story during
several times, yeah.
Marathon meeting.
Amanda Vinicky, is it a bit of a scapegoat? The mayor perhaps not coming up with answers for why gun violence is spiking this year at about the same rate that it did last year?
The superintendent pointed out, or several older people pointed out, I mean, this was sort of a battle. You had some members of the city council coming to the defense of the blue and kind of begging Superintendent Brown, what more can we do for you? They were basically saying, we want to give you more money. They believe that overtime is hurting, that cops are strapped for energy and support, and he did not go there. Others were certainly bashing him. So I think it comes up, there's this loggerheads, right, where you have members of the city council who say, no, too much money is going to police, and that the solution is to stop funding, to reinvent the entire criminal justice system. And then others that are saying, hey, wait a second, we want more resources in our communities. In this regard, resources means police officers. So I guess part of a scapegoat, but I think a true belief, the mayor in her press conference afterward went on to say that she does support the notion of no more cash bail, that you shouldn't be behind bars because you are poor. Her point, she says, is that there are too many people that are dangerous that are being released. And it is that statistic that she's really trying to hone in on.
But as Patrick Smith says, there's no evidence that really shows that there are more folks on electronic monitoring or being released that are committing reoffending, at least with violent crimes, than happens typically, or that's happened year over year. Back to the special meeting, Alex Nitkin, Lightfoot blames, quote unquote, Burger King Ed for being the mastermind behind all the opposition. Here's what she had to say.
Burger King Ed is still alive and well, and he is messing around and trying to create chaos. Now, he can't do it he can't do it in a way that makes him public, but he's doing it through puppets and trying to orchestrate chaos.
Alex Nitkin, is Ed Burke, who she's referring to as Burger King Ed there, is he the mastermind behind all this opposition, calling special city council meetings, and are people like Ray Lopez and others his puppets, as she alleges here?
Well, if he is, he's very quiet about it. A lot of people pointed out today that Ed Burke was not present there. I think I may have seen him at some point piping in virtually, but he was certainly not in the chamber. This is a a line that we've heard a lot from the mayor when she talks about contention or opposition, particularly from people like Raymond Lopez, who continue to really be a thorn in her side and try to be very critical pretty much at all times that Ed Burke is orchestrating this kind of silent coup in the background. You heard that yesterday she compared it to the council wars of the 80s, which of course Ed Burke was also a starring player in. A lot of the critics of Lightfoot would certainly dispute that, since that was really, I think we see now a racially motivated resistance against Harold Washington specifically, and this is maybe a little more nuanced and three-dimensional than that. But clearly having a little bit of fun with the subject of Ed Burke's indictment, of course, when he more than a year ago now was indicted for allegedly shaking down a Burger King to try to steer business toward his private law firm. And she's continually brought that up.
I guess just something that was interesting to me was this whole notion of having this emergency meeting leading up to the July 4th meeting in the first place, and really what that does for these alder people beyond, Alex, as you put it, the airing of grievances that clearly needed to be let. The mayor continually said, and back to point by Brown, that he kind of tried to say, I'm not sure this was appreciated by members of the city council. He said, this is a waste of my time to be doing today. It's the most violent weekend in Chicago annually. This is when my attention could be better served. So while the mayor afterwards said, yeah, this is productive, that it could have happened any other time, I'm not sure how much people at this point are paying attention to what went on. It's leading into a holiday. Beautiful weather in Chicago. Other than reporters, I don't know who really is focused on it, other than perhaps older people being able to say, if, come Monday, Tuesday, unfortunately, these predictions of violence bear out, that they'll be able to justify, hey, this is what we did. We demanded action from the CPD.
And in fact, the weekend has gotten off to a violent start. Lynn Sweet, you are the Washington Bureau Chief of Sun-Times. I know that you pay close attention to what happens back here at home. How does this play? How is Chicago's violence problem playing nationally, and the dynamic between Mayor Lightfoot and City Council?
Well, it is the crime in Chicago has been the subject just a few days ago, last week, when President Biden unveiled his multiple proposals to deal with crime in big cities. Chicago was one of them. When he had a round table with just, I think, a dozen participants, he had a violence prevention expert from Chicago who was at the White House with him. So in his speech, he mentioned it. It isn't really, whatever, can I just tell you, from my vantage point, this special meeting is messaging. I understand that Lori Lightfoot, as the executive, here I'm using a little Washington analogy, is just using a technique of deflecting. You say something to her she doesn't like, let's just say Burger King Ed, to maybe change the subject on it. The problem in Chicago is crime, not a special meeting where some older people might think they can inoculate themselves from criticism that they will get, that they all share. It's not just Lori Lightfoot alone. If we have a terrible weekend, and God forbid we do have one, I hope the predictions are wrong. So Chicago's reputation is still as a city with an enormous crime problem, and that's been true during the presidency of Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and so far Joe Biden.
And speaking of a different kind of crime, Patrick Smith, alderperson Carrie Austin, is charged. We knew she was under federal scrutiny, but now she is federally indicted along with her chief of staff. There was a bit of a drought there for 3 months where there were no city council members federally indicted. Explain the charges that Austin and her chief of staff face.
Yeah, Austin is charged with taking bribes, things like sump pumps and other work and improvements to her home in exchange for access to TIF money. I'm sure that Alex and Amanda know even more details than it, but this is a shoe we've all been waiting to drop for a while. And now it is, I think, the 3 most senior members of city council who are all under federal indictment. Is that right?
Yeah.
Pretty incredible.
Ed Burke, Patrick Daley Thompson, and Carrie Austin.
Yeah.
And she said that she only accepted cake from these developers when, in fact, you read through the indictment and she got, sump pubs, kitchen cabinets, also tiles in white or vein white. Anybody know what color that is? Because my veins certainly aren't white. I don't know what that is, but allegedly she that, and it's not, by the way, just her. It's also her chief of staff.
And Alex Nicken, you know, Patrick Daley Thompson denies the charges, fighting them. Alderman Burke denies the charges. You know, the batting average for public officials that go up against the U.S. Attorney's Office is not very good. What do you anticipate that Austin's response will be?
Well, interestingly, so far we haven't heard any response from her or Chester Wilson or her attorneys. As far as I know, they have not entered a plea yet either. We're waiting on an arraignment. I do think it's worth pointing out that this is very different from the Patrick Daley Thompson indictment that we saw a couple months ago now, and that was related to him allegedly lying to the IRS about his taxes, about his dealings with a bank that went insolvent. This now Kerry Austin indictment is more similar, I would say, to that Burke indictment in that it is a very clear-cut sort of pay-to-play. It is a quid pro quo.
Can I jump in here for a moment?
Go ahead.
What they all have, they are all the same. It's people who are greedy, who think the law doesn't apply to them. Yes, I know the indictments are different in how they carry out their schemes, but the scheme to cheat and take stuff that you wouldn't get if you weren't an alder person, and then you have the chutzpah to think somehow you will not be investigated for it. If nothing else, you would think their self-preservation would keep them honest. I've been covering this for a long time, and I know all of you have too. It does not stop, and they get caught. And the Patrick Thompson indictment only takes it to a higher level. Kerry Austin is kind of garden variety greed, if it's true. Here it is, a guy, he gets a break and gets a mortgage, and then the bank doesn't care if he pays interest. That's not enough. He does more, he then deducts the mortgage interest he didn't pay. It's like, and you think you're not going to get in trouble?
And all these previous prosecutions and convictions don't seem to serve as any kind of deterrent, as we see right now. You know, Joe Ferguson, the Inspector General, Patrick Smith, he must have played a big role here, as the U.S. Attorney's Office has been very aggressive, but he's the one that starts out investigating city council, investigating city ethics problems and corruption. Is this going to be is he going to leave behind a pretty strong legacy here of overseeing city council when he goes in October?
I think there's no question about that. Yeah, we know that he is, Alan broke the story, that he is not going to be seeking what would be a fourth term. Absolutely, with the investigation that he started here, the work he did around the Laquan McDonald shooting, I think there's Ferguson clearly, I mean, maybe partially just by how long he was in the office, but also the work he did clearly leaves behind a legacy, clearly helped shape the city and change the city in certain ways.
Alex Nicken, what's behind this decision not to seek another term? I mean, Rahm Emanuel reappointed him even though they were at loggerheads. Lightfoot has been a long time associated with him. They worked together in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Is there some kind of personal fallout there, or is Ferguson deciding, 3 terms is enough?
We don't know about any specific personal fallout. What we do know is that he has been there for 12 years. The mayor did sort of hint leading up to this, maybe it's just sort of his time. She spoke very glowingly of him today. We're appreciative of his legacy and everything that he's done. I think that what I'm really going to be keeping an eye on here is whether the mayor and the city council also reappoints Deborah Witzberg, who is the new deputy inspector general for public safety, this new office that just grew out of the Police Accountability Task Force a few years ago, a branch of the IG's office specifically devoted to tracking the Chicago Police Department and its court-mandated reforms. Her term is also going to be up in line with the end of Ferguson's term, and so I'm going to be watching to see if she comes up again, and this is also a reason why Ferguson in his letter to the mayor last night said, I want to get started on this process now. I don't want any kind of interim to be put in place. I want us to have enough time to get all of this planted. And he also notably in this very long letter did not say why he was leaving or any sort of wax poetic about what an honor and privilege it's been. He said, "This is how I want this process to go, where we're going to choose my replacement."
There's been
that's it.
A lot of memorable battles over the years as the IG has sought to expand the reach of that office over City Council, and Ed Burke has led the charge trying to deny that. Lynn Sweet, let's move to national news. The Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg facing felony charges of fraud, grand larceny, allegedly for failing to pay taxes on benefits and perks and gifts that the organization gave out and he ostensibly signed off on. After 3 years of investigating and seeking Trump's tax returns, do you believe that this is the end game here for the AG in New York and the District Attorney in Manhattan, or the tip of the iceberg?
Tip of the iceberg, because I read the indictment, and if you want to read about how some people think the rules don't apply to them, I know it's a theme that we're talking about on this show, that the taxes that I hope my colleagues on the show pay, the things that working people have to pay, that we do, that people think they don't. So this off-the-book scheme that he did, so he has multiple grand larceny and some other schemes he did to avoid taxation. The one that I think might imperil at least the Trump children and other people in that orbit is that they had 2 sets of books, and you got compensated in things that they put on off the books, so you didn't have to pay tax on it, like paying rent on an apartment. Now, some of the things that Weisselberg is accused of is just an outright lie. He lied and said he didn't live in New York City in order not to pay New York City income tax. Okay, and that might not be a systemic violation that could really ensnare more people in the organization. That might just be a unique thing to him. But once you know now that 2 sets of books exist, that just puts, at least it would seem to me, everyone high up in a Trump organization at peril. The prosecutors have those books. This is New York State prosecutors and New York City prosecutors. And now what we also don't know is, and they wrote the indictment very artfully, there's still room in these tax issues for the federal prosecutors to step in.
And as we see in federal indictments here, and these are state charges, but oftentimes, a lot of the times right now with ComEd and Mike Madigan, it's very clear that prosecutors are putting the squeeze on some of these folks that they charge with initial crimes like this to flip. Every legal observer that's watched this thinks that the state prosecutors there, want to get Weisselberg to flip either on the Trump children or on Trump himself.
Right, but it depends. As outrageous as this tax cheating scheme, if true, it does not carry a sentence that's onerous, meaning unless they have more stuff to throw at him, it may not necessarily be, as in other cases, if he were facing a 20-year term, 14, whatever, for these alleged crimes, it's one thing. It may be that he decides to take this further. The other thing is, this is still very, very early as these things go. So it's just too soon to say that he faces enough potential time to have a good insight as to whether or not he'll flip against Trump. An indictment against the Donald Trump organization is serious, since it's a small organization that has been led by Trump.
All right, let's move to the other. I'm sorry, go ahead, jump in there.
Oh, I was going to say, it's easy to say that a prison sentence isn't onerous if you're the one who wouldn't have to serve it if it was handed down.
Well, as I understand, some of these charges carry a max of 15 years, but they also they possibly only carry probation. Lynn Sweet, we have to get to the other national news. The January 6th Select Committee put together by House Speaker Pelosi. 8 members. One of them is Republican Liz Cheney. The Republican House Leader Kevin McCarthy can appoint 5 members. What do you think he's going to do? What's his play?
Okay. Actually, see, the 13-member panel, technically, Pelosi can appoint all of them. The resolution is written that with consultation with Kevin McCarthy, she could do it. So that might keep some of the people who don't believe in reality off the panel if McCarthy just wants to kind of blow up the thing. It is noteworthy, of course, that of the 2 people who voted with Democrats on this select committee, was Adam Kinzinger from Illinois, who has been one of the leaders in trying to fight the Trumpism wing of the party that believes in election denial, conspiracy theories, and non-reality based things. The other one is Liz Cheney, who did get picked for the panel. I have a column on it today. When I watched her at this press briefing yesterday after they had their organizing meeting in front of Pelosi's office, it did strike me, wow, there she is standing with a group of Democrats, defiantly, confidently, and even proudly that she took a position from Pelosi. Kevin McCarthy, in his press conference, trashed Cheney in every way possible.
It seems like Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, the only Republicans really all in on moving the party and the country beyond the election conspiracy theories and falsehoods. And that's it for us right now. We are out of time, so our thanks to Patrick Smith, Lynn Sweet, Alex Nitkin, and Amanda Vinicky. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website. And be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, and then 6 p.m. Sunday for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. And both shows will look at what the term patriotism means for some Black and Latino Chicagoans on this July 4th weekend. And then we're back all next week at 7 o'clock. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy your holiday weekend. Stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you Monday.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford